We now come to the backbench debate on attainment and engagement of boys in education, and I call Sam Rushworth, who will speak for around 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I also thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting me today's debate, and to colleagues across the House for their interest in what I believe is one of the most overlooked and consequential challenges of our time: the underachievement of boys at every stage of education. And this debate's not about grievance, it's about evidence. And I hope that today we can focus on the data and the consequences and the things that must change to do better by our boys, not instead of girls, but alongside them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm also proud to have Kian and Alex in the gallery with us this afternoon, two work experience students from my constituency in Bishop Auckland. They've helped me prepare for today's debate, working alongside my parliamentary assistant, and they've done so with thoughtfulness, curiosity and maturity. And I hope that their presence here today is a reminder of the promise that exists in young men in County Durham and beyond. But we cannot ignore the reality that too many of our boys are being left behind by a system that does not fully see them, expect much from them, or equip them with the tools to thrive. Let's start with the facts. By Key Stage 2, only 57% of boys meet expected standards in reading, writing and maths. That's 7 percentage points behind girls. And when looking at the writing gap alone, it's 13 points behind. In their GCSE exams, boys on average achieve half a grade lower than girls across every subject. At A-levels, girls outperform boys by an average of over a grade and a half across their best 3 subjects. And girls are even pulling ahead in the new T-level qualification. Just 30.4% of 18-year-old boys went into higher education last year, compared to 42% of girls. Boys make up over 70% of permanent school exclusions and 95% of young people in custody. I will.
He's just mentioned 8 in 9 men in prison report that have been excluded from school. I was a secondary school teacher before I entered Parliament, and the attainment gap was a big worry then. But my biggest worry then was that we don't really respond properly to people who are neurodiverse and cater for them, and understand that there are about 20% of our young people, including girls by the way, who are different learners, and our curriculum doesn't really cater for them. Does he share my concerns?
I do share that concern. I think we should have a full debate as well on the way that we address that very issue, as well as young care leavers. And we know what the prison population looks like, and I think it's an excellent point. But this is not just about adolescence. It actually begins in early years. By the end of reception, just 60.7% of boys are assessed as school ready, compared to 75% of girls, a point that I'll return to later in my speech. And where does it end? 250,000 young men aged 16 to 24 are classed as NEET, not in education, employment or training. That's 78% higher than the number for young women. This is a post-COVID increase of 40% for young males, compared to just a 7% increase for young females. And what's more, as the Centre for Social Justice reported recently, for those young men who are in work, the gender pay gap has been reversed. Young men are now out-earned by their female peers, including among the university educated. This national challenge is especially acute in constituencies like mine, Bishop Auckland, and across former coalfield communities in the northeast, where too often working class boys start behind and stay behind. I did not call this debate today merely to highlight an issue. I want it to lead to action, and I'm calling for real change. This begins with taking the issue seriously, and what concerns me most is not just the data, but the absence of outrage and lack of urgency. It wasn't always this way. In the 1970s and 80s, it was girls who were lagging behind, and the government rightly took action to improve outcomes for girls, introducing targeted support, challenging curriculum bias, expanding grammar schools for girls and promoting girls' access to STEM. And these were not small tweaks. They were deliberate, strategic interventions, and they worked. Now that the situation is reversed, with boys persistently underachieving, where is the strategy? I'm not talking about a general strategy to address deprivation or educational disadvantage, but a specific, evidence-based, deliverable strategy around boys and young men which addresses the gender-based aspects of underachievement. At the foundation of the strategy must be a resolve to stop blaming boys and start rebuilding their self-worth. Yeah. There was a time in the 70s society did the same to girls. It became known as the deficit approach because it attributed girls' underachievement relative to boys to a lack of effort or a deficiency in them rather than the failures and limitations of the education system or prevalent socioeconomic trends. So-called biological determinists argued that gender differences were natural and unalterable, that simply put, girls were not as bright. Thankfully, those nonsense theories have been well and truly debunked when it comes to girls. Yet too often, when we talk about boys, the tone shifts to blame. It's as if boys' underachievement is seen as self-inflicted, a product of laziness or of so-called toxic masculinity.
On that point, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way, and I congratulate him on securing this incredibly important debate. In my 8.5 years as a maths teacher teaching inner city schools, I have to say, and this goes for any group, not just for boys, but for any group, it is never a problem of just aspiration or lack of aspiration. It is always a problem of lack of access and lack of knowledge. Does he agree?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a point well made, and I hope that we'll have more contributions of that nature today. It's because boys are not the problem. The system is failing them. Of course we need to help boys to develop empathy, respect for those who are different, self-control, and awareness of how their words and actions affect others. But can we please be more careful not to tell boys that they are by nature toxic, or that in 2025 they are privileged simply by being male, when many feel anything but. They feel undervalued, distrusted, and anxious they will never live up to society's expectations. Please.
Tribute to this debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, but the Honourable Gentleman has provoked me to do so by the character of his insight. It is brave and right of him to deconstruct the nonsense about toxic masculinity and also to emphasise that white working class boys of the kind that are prevalent in his constituency are particularly disadvantaged by a system which has underestimated, indeed neglected, their needs. He mentioned needs. As an education minister, I did my best to address that, but successive governments have done insufficient. And I congratulate him on bringing this debate and what he said in it.
Thank you. Thank you for his intervention, and I hope he will still contribute. Boys feel undervalued, distrusted and anxious, that they won't live up to society's expectations. Sam Fender, an icon of the North East, put it recently like this. He said, "We're very good about talking about privilege, white, male or straight privilege, but we rarely talk about class." And that's a lot of the reason all the young lads are seduced by demagogues like Andrew Tate. They're being shamed all the time and made to feel like they're a problem. It's this narrative being told to white boys from nowhere towns. People preach to some kid in a pit town in Durham who's got nothing and tell him he's privileged. Then Tate tells him he's worth something. It's seductive. We can't leave that space to be filled by online influencers selling toxic answers. We have to offer something better: belonging, purpose and hope. Evidence shows that boys thrive when, rather than treat them as a problem, they're trusted within a culture of high expectations, when we set them up to succeed, and when they know their learning is relevant and will take them somewhere. The coded message in our current curriculum is that society values academic excellence over development of technical skills and know-how. It's as if we've replaced the 11+ with a 16+ exam. where those who get good GCSE results, those who pass, go on to sit A-levels, which are given higher esteem, and those who fail are pushed onto vocational courses as though these skills are lesser. A good example of a school bucking this trend, attended by some of the young people from my constituency, is the University Technical College in Newton Aycliffe, which Ofsted recently rated as one of the happiest schools in the country. I've met some of their students. They all have familiar stories about how they were previously suspended and in trouble all the time at school, but when they attended the UTC, they found purpose, they build relationships, they promote leadership, and they make a child feel known. And it works. Children are thriving, boys included. Elsewhere, schools working with the Yes He Can programme or applying the Taking Boys Seriously framework from Ulster University are closing gaps and rebuilding... I looked up to see where Jim Shannon is when I mentioned Ulster, and he's not in his place. Rebuilding trust with disengaged boys. Not coddling them, but understanding them. Another example is Hayes Travel in Nissan, who will take young people from the age of 14 to give them vocational work experience. I welcome the government's industrial strategy. I think it's really exciting that for the first time in a long time we're seeing a real effort to create meaningful career pathways into the sorts of secure jobs that young people in the North East used to be able to aspire to. Another good example is the plan to build 1.5 million homes. We know that we can't do that unless we have more skilled young people coming into those professions. Last week I spent half a day with some young apprentices from Bishop Auckland College bricklaying with Gleeson Homes in my constituency. And it was fabulous to see these young men who really had a sense of direction. They knew that in a few years' time they're going to be earning good salaries and able to build good family lives.
On that point, will he give
I
way?
will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and he is giving a truly insightful and much needed speech on this important matter. But will he join me in recognising the importance of pre-apprenticeship work as well for those younger boys not yet ready to take on apprenticeships, and the value of some of the voluntary organisations like Empower in my constituency in St Blasey?
100%, and it's another good example of why we need to create these pathways. And before I close, let me just say, I'm not calling for us to stop encouraging young men to go to university. I'm a working class lad, and I was much better suited to go in the academic route than I was to working as a mechanic or something, as those who've ever seen me put up a shelf would attest. But what I am calling for is for a greater parity of esteem, for respect for all skills. And for earlier opportunities, as my honourable friend just pointed out, for earlier opportunities for people to feel valued. And finally, I'd just like to turn attention to... Yeah, quickly.
I'm going to praise him again. He's absolutely right about revaluing practical learning. I like him. I come from a similar background to him. And I wasn't clever enough to be practical, so I had to become academic. And re-establishing the idea that vocational and practical accomplishment has at least equal prowess to academic learning. I think greater prowess, actually, is fundamental. And could I just add one other example with your indulgence, Madam Deputy Speaker? He will know of the men's shed movement, typically for older men. But I visited the men's shed in Long Sutton, of which I'm president, and there is a youth shed bringing young people into a community, which is male, by the way, allowing boys to share and learn and grow.
Thank you. I'm going to speed through the rest. I'm conscious of time and other people's contributions, but let me just say we want young boys to go to university too, and to declare an interest. I used to tutor for the Brilliant Club in schools in the North East that was about young people who maybe their parents didn't go to university, and helping them to have that aspiration and to realise that what they can do as well. And finally, if I may turn to early years and say that, as I said at the beginning, a lot of this is actually set before the age of 5. So we know that even by the age of 5, boys are behind girls. There are some significant things that this government is doing that I think are important in this regard. They include the Best Start Family Hubs announced just this week, which is not just about children being able to access support, but parents. And I know as a parent myself that I have raised my 7-year-old son much better than I raised my 18-year-old son, because I made so many mistakes in knowing how to help him. And too often I think I tried to use a sort of carrot and stick approach, and I didn't understand well enough how to help him to reflect on his behaviour, although they are both wonderful boys. The Free Breakfast Clubs initiative, this is about so much more than just breakfast. I recently visited Cockfield Primary School in my constituency, where since they were an early adopter of this scheme, attendance went from about 10 or 12 children to 60 children every morning. And I met children who used to have difficulty being on time or who were regularly absent, and was told how they're now coming and they're thriving. And a wise head teacher there was not just using that scheme to feed the children, but they were engaged in meaningful activities that helped to develop their social and emotional skills. Until I was elected, I was a governor at Benfieldsside Primary School in County Durham, where we introduced a specialist SEL programme, so social emotional learning. And this is about helping children to develop so-called 21st century skills, skills like emotional self-regulation, recognising what they're feeling, self-awareness, social awareness, empathy, how to build healthy relationships. Within a year of that scheme being introduced, the teacher reported remarkable differences, and parents coming in and saying something is happening to my child because they're so much calmer, they're so much more able to manage their behaviour. So there's real opportunities for us in the breakfast clubs, in the free school meal provision, in the Best Start family hubs to grasp this. And it's not just about increased funding, it's also about content. And if I have one ask of the Minister today, it would be to give a 30 minutes of time, either herself or some of her officials, to meet with me and people that I used to work with in this field, who have developed these really useful tools that can be introduced in any classroom setting. And in conclusion, I believe we urgently need a national strategy for boys' attainment, cross-party, evidence-based and rooted in fairness. It should invest in teacher training that recognises gender bias and engages boys more effectively. It should embed social emotional learning throughout the curriculum, especially in early years and transition stages. Expand vocational and technical pathways, recognising different routes to success. Promote leadership opportunities for boys in school life. And most importantly, ensure transparent, gender disaggregated data to hold ourselves accountable nationally and locally. Madam Deputy Speaker, this isn't just a debate about attainment, it's a debate about dignity, about who we see and who we invest in. I don't want boys in Bishop Auckland or in Bootle, Barry or Basingstoke to feel like the system has no place for them. I want them to feel seen, supported and believed in, because when we raise the floor for those who are struggling, we lift the whole classroom. So let us act with some clarity and courage that we showed a generation ago for girls. Our boys in our society deserve nothing less.
The